Hi everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar on teaching kids how to use online gaming platforms safely. My name is Carlota and I'm a communication officer here at EUROPOL, where I focus on cybercrime prevention. Before joining EUROPOL, I worked in game publishing and esports. In that role, I had the opportunity to work very closely with schools, with universities, and I saw firsthand how central online games have become in young people's lives. I'll begin with a short presentation where we will discuss the dangers the children face on these platforms and how we can protect them. We'll also be showing off Cyber Defenders, an educational game we made to teach kids about these risks and, more importantly, how to deal with them. After the presentation, I will invite my colleague Gabby to join me. Gabby is a social media expert at EUROPOL. Together we will have a quick chat about the relationships between gaming platforms and social media and the dangers that these platforms hold. We will be ending the session with a Q&A. We will answer all your questions, so please feel free to already scan the QR code on the screen. This will take you to Slido, where you can ask all your questions throughout the presentation. There's no need to wait until the very end. We're also going to be putting in a few polls throughout the presentation, and we would love to discuss the results when the Q&A begins. So please go ahead and already scan the QR so you don't miss anything. Please keep in mind that Gabby and I are communication experts and not police officers. Throughout the presentation, we will mention a few law enforcement operations, but we will be focusing on the matter at hand, which is how we can use education and communication to teach children to stay safe on online platforms. If you would like to know more about EUROPOL's operations, you can find out more on our website. Let's get started. It's very different to play games now than it was 30 years ago. Playing games was mostly done offline in the 90s. You could play by yourself or with someone that was sitting right next to you. If you wanted to communicate, you just use your voice in the same room. Games now are always online. When players log off, those worlds kind of keep going, even if no one is in them. This has turned gaming worlds into these digital realities and social spaces where players could build, create, have experiences, and then go back to them the next day. Online games are social spaces, and the image we used to have of a kid in a dark room playing games alone instead of being out with his friends is no longer accurate. Online kids can talk to people from all over the world. They play in virtual worlds made by other users and spend time in places that never really turn off. This completely changes the way we think about safety because kids now use the internet for far more than just playing games. We might think that gaming platforms are these lawless digital wastelands if we only read the news. But actually, for most kids, they're just places where they hang out with their friends. There's this large study published in JAMA Network Open back in 2022 that found that children aged 9 to 10 who played video games 3 or more hours a day performed better on tasks measuring working memory and impulse control, and even showed differences in brain activity linked to those skills. Playing video games, it helps young people get better at making decisions, solving problems, using logic. And this is especially true for teenagers. Games help with motor skills, with planning, talking to others, and working together with other players. Plus, and this may be the most important thing, these online games teach kids that getting better at something, it takes time. Progress is rarely instant. In a game, you fail, you try again, and get better each time. It says, game over, try again, and you look at the screen. Okay, maybe one more time. That may be the only thing about games that hasn't really changed since the 90s. We're all constantly surrounded by devices and this sense of digital instant gratification, whether we like it or not. We're not as driven to go the extra mile to get something done, but games, they still teach kids about hard work, about persistence, and about repetition. There are known benefits in all of these areas. But there are two sides to every story. And the truth is that the very things that make this kind of positive interaction possible, things like social networking, global connectivity, and user-generated content, it's also what makes it possible for really bad things to happen. Criminals don't have to break into these worlds to exploit children. They simply sign in like everyone else, and it's easy for them to make a profile that says they are 16, 12, or even 9 years old. Platforms with little to no age verification, such as Roblox or Minecraft, are some of the most popular video games of all time. As an example, in 2025, Roblox had 151 million daily active users, and more than 50% were under the age of 16. Minecraft is another great example. It has 55 million daily active users, and 20% of those are under 15. These platforms became popular because it was easy for people to get to. They're platforms you can access on computers, on tablets, consoles, and now even on phones. And since it's easy to start playing, these platforms are mostly used by kids, but also by criminals who want to take advantage of them. And it's not just Roblox, and it's not just Minecraft. Every online game you can think of that is popular among children, any game that opens a communication channel with anyone in the world, comes with this risk. Any large online game that allows open chat, private messages, friend requests, or voice communication can be misused in similar ways. Minecraft, Call of Duty, GTA, League of Legends, or Fortnite, there are hundreds of them. When kids play these games, they face a lot of different risks. One major risk is grooming. Since most online games have chat features, relationships can grow over time. Usually people start talking privately after finding common interests or working together in games in a team. That's the problem. Online game chat features, they do have content filters that block users who are thought to be doing or saying harmful things. But criminals use trust and connection to get kids to keep talking outside of that platform, somewhere where there are fewer restrictions. Fraud and theft are also significant risks in online gaming environments. Children might be tricked into giving up their login information, verification codes, profiles in exchange for help, friendship, or free in-game currency and rare items. Offenders will sometimes pretend to be other kids to gain their trust before asking for these things. And once access is granted, accounts can be locked by changing the password, emptied of virtual goods, or used to scam other people. It's important to realize that the items that you use virtually in these games are worth real money. Skins, game currency, collectibles, upgraded characters, they can be traded or resold on secondary markets. And this creates incentives for criminals to manipulate children into transferring these items voluntarily, often through things like fake competitions or time-limited offers designed to create this kind of sense of urgency that we typically see in other kinds of scams as well. Personal data is another target, another big one, and it might be the biggest one. Information that players give while playing that seems harmless, like where they go to school, how old they are, and what city they live in, it can be used to steal their identities, impersonate them, or force them to do something they might not want to. In more serious cases, offenders can slowly gather small bits of information about a child and then threaten to reveal private chats, pictures, or content that the child finds embarrassing unless the child pays money, gives more information, or they get more access. Blackmail like this can get worse really, really quickly, and young people are obviously the most affected and traumatized by it. Criminals often say these requests are part of a group activity, a way to get access to special content or proof of loyalty in an online friendship. It never looks like fraud, and that's the trick. That's how they get it to work. Video games and the massive community around them is based on the idea that everyone should feel like they are part of a group. In this context, criminals exploit things like the connection you form with other players when working together, when playing a game together, helping each other out, developing online friendships. Kids are more likely to get hurt because things aren't clear, because they might not have had the life experience to understand that not everything is as it seems in online environments. That's why it's essential that kids are well informed and supervised. Perhaps the biggest online risk we've all read about in the news is that children are exposed to harmful content on these gaming platforms. Because these platforms are easy to use and they let you be creative, any kid who doesn't know how to code can make a game and share it with the world, allowing other kids to play these games too. It's pretty great, right? But it also means that not everyone creating this content has good intentions. On an individual level, this can mean a single user creating inappropriate or disturbing content, using in-game chat to share harmful material, or deliberately trying to shock, harass, or manipulate younger players. Sometimes it starts with offensive language or edgy humor, but it can escalate into targeted harassment or attempts to move conversations into private spaces. But there is also the issue of organized misuse. Online gaming platforms have been used by extremist actors and violent groups to spread propaganda and attempt recruitment. And Europol doesn't just look at this from a theoretical perspective. We see how gaming spaces are sometimes misused in real investigations. Last year, Europol backed a joint action with 8 other countries after police found extremist and racist content spreading on these gaming platforms. During that action, thousands of harmful links were sent to be taken down. This included jihadist propaganda, violent right-wing extremist material, and racist content. What makes this especially complex is how quickly it spreads beyond the game itself. In some cases, offenders recreated terrorist attacks or school shootings inside 3D game environments. They recorded the gameplay, they added extremist messaging, and then they shared it on mainstream social media to reach a much wider audience. On certain streaming platforms, live chat functions were even misused to try to recruit minors into extremist groups. So the big question is, what do we do when something goes wrong? What's the first step we should take? While being aware is important, taking action is even more so. First, children need to understand when to ask for help. Informing a trusted adult when they are confronted with a dangerous situation, that's essential. Second, both kids and adults should always use the platform's own tools for reporting problems. Many of the big gaming platforms have ways for players to report inappropriate content, harassment, or strange behavior while they are playing. By reporting early, platforms can get rid of the harmful content much faster and find accounts that are being abusive. Finally, it is very important to call national hotlines or your local police if you think someone is being stalked, manipulated, blackmailed, or exposed to extremist or sexual exploitation material. These are not small online incidents, and they can escalate really, really quickly. At Europol, we see how organized networks exploit these spaces. One example is Project Compass, joined by 29 countries from around the globe, coordinated by Europol's European Counterterrorism Center. It focuses on combating decentralized nihilist networks known as the COM, which actively targets vulnerable young people across online platforms to carry out self-harm and eventually groom them into committing suicide. These networks don't just spread propaganda. They manipulate and extort minors, encourage self-harm, violence, and the production of child sexual exploitation material. There are subgroups that specialize in sextortion, cyber attacks, and inciting violence in the real world. Another example of our work in these spaces is GRIM, an operational task force with 11 countries involved, which focuses on tackling what is known as violence as a service, where criminal groups outsource violent acts and recruit minors to carry them out. These networks often begin their recruitment online. They approach children and teenagers using social media, messaging apps, and yes, online gaming platforms too. Through manipulation, promises of money or status, or by creating a false sense of belonging, minors can be drawn into criminal schemes without fully understanding the consequences. GRIM brings together law enforcement from across Europe to identify and disrupt these networks, share intelligence, and prevent further recruitment. The aim is not only to arrest those responsible, but to protect young people from being exploited in the first place. Law enforcement doesn't only respond after harm has happened. In many countries, specialized units conduct online patrols and online games and engage in prevention work, including awareness campaigns and digital outreach to identify risks early and protect young users. The key message is simple. Report early, involve adults immediately, and escalate to law enforcement when necessary. Online harm is real harm, and there are systems in place to respond. The platforms themselves are powerful social spaces. They allow real-time interaction, broadcasting, community building, and that's exactly why they can also be exploited if there isn't awareness and guidance around them. A lot of attention has been paid to the risks of online gaming platforms in the news in the last year. Similarly, we have also seen much debate happen around children's access to social media platforms. Many modern games already function as social networks. They include direct messaging, voice chat, friend systems, group features, and user-generated content. For a 12 or 13-year-old, a game can offer the same social functions as a social media platform, but without being labeled as one. Concerns about safety around online games and social media have led to a lot of public debate. There is the question of whether existing moderation is sufficient and whether platforms should be pushed to implement stronger protections, such as age-based communication limits, but this is only part of the solution. The public's concern is understandable, but if a platform is blocked, kids will go to another one, which might not have better safety options. When access to one type of digital social space becomes limited, they look for alternatives. They always do. And increasingly, those alternatives are online gaming platforms. And this changes where education and supervision need to focus. It's easy to forget that games have become social spaces in their own right if we only focus on traditional social media sites. And parents and teachers may not realize how much social interaction is going on in games because we tend to see them as just play. The need for digital literacy and online safety education becomes more important than ever before. Teaching kids how to be safe in these places is a better long-term solution than thinking that platform restrictions alone will solve the problem. And this changes where education and supervision needs to focus. It's easy to forget that games have become social spaces in their own right if we only focus on traditional social media sites. And parents and teachers may not realize how much social interaction is going on in games because we tend to see them as just play. The need for digital literacy and online safety education becomes more important than ever. Teaching kids how to be safe in these places is a better long-term solution than thinking that the platform restrictions will solve the problem on their own. And this preparation cannot sit only with schools. We should expect from gaming platforms the same responsibility to keep users safe as we would expect from any other industry to create safe products. Games are often seen as harmless entertainment, but modern online games are large, open social environments. They are products children consume on a daily basis. They reflect the real world in many ways. They connect children with friends, but also connect them with strangers. They open a door to everyone, the good and the bad. But we cannot rely alone on the platforms. Parents have ways to keep their children safe too, and it all starts with communication. Parental involvement doesn't mean that they always need to be on the watch like some kind of guard. It means knowing what games kids are playing. It means knowing who they talk to and how they talk to each other in those places. It means building a habit of having an open and ongoing conversation. If we wouldn't let a young child leave the house by themselves and navigate a city without supervision, boundaries, or guidance, we shouldn't expect them to do the same in online environments. It's the same thing. Platform restrictions can lower exposure, sure, but they can't take the place of home-based engagement. Education and parental involvement are still the most reliable and long-term safeguards we have. We need to teach them what these threats look like. Kids should learn how to spot content or interactions that aren't safe, how to disconnect safely, and when and how to ask for help. When we talk about online safety, one of the biggest challenges is that advice can often stay a little abstract. So when children hear, "don't share personal information," or "be careful with strangers," those rules don't always stick unless they're connected to something concrete, something memorable, something they can experience on their own. And that's the main reason why educational games can work so well, right? When students are actively involved, they tend to absorb and remember more than with traditional passive methods. And using video games in the classroom isn't something new. For the past 20 years, educational games have become a whole genre in the gaming industry. Games like Democracy teach kids about the complexities of international politics. There are math games, there's history games. Even games like Minecraft, which we mentioned before, are being used to teach programming. This also happens when we teach cybersecurity. Using games to teach has been shown to help people spot fishy behavior better than just passively teaching them. And that's where Cyber Defenders comes in. Cyber Defenders is an educational game we made in 2024 for kids ages 9 to 12 that shows them what these risks look like on gaming platforms. We wanted to create an experience in the very environment that children recognize as their safe playing space and show them what the red flags are. We wanted to show them what they could encounter and what they need to watch out for. Roblox games are usually played online, sometimes with hundreds of other players you can interact with, but Cyber Defenders is built on a secure server that only one player can join, and this guarantees a totally secure experience while they're learning. In the game, children step into the role of a Europol police officer. Instead of sitting back and watching risks happen, they're actively solving cases. It's set up around missions and puzzles they need to solve to reach the next level. After each mission, kids get a reward and a short lesson that explains the safety idea behind what they just did. These lessons include important messages about why it's not safe to share information online. One mission, for example, asks kids to listen to a few conversations and pick out the one where someone is asking dangerous personal questions. That is a very useful skill, not because it's a perfect reflection of real life, of what can happen in these online games, but because it helps you focus and get into the mindset that when you're playing in these open spaces, you need to be alert. It teaches children what an uncomfortable situation can look like, and it reinforces the idea that personal questions from someone you don't know should be a clear sign to pause the game and get help. So Cyber Defenders isn't trying to scare kids or trying to make them remember a set of rules. It's giving them a structured and engaging way to practice the mindset behind online safety, spot the warning signs, slow down, and ask for help. Many research studies have shown that this type of interactive learning, especially when it's scenario-based learning through games, it's a much better way to improve decision-making skills than passive lessons. Instead of memorizing rules, kids make choices and see what happens when they do so in a safe environment. The situations in Cyber Defenders are based on real things that happen online, but they're presented in a fun way that keeps kids from being put in real situations that might scare or bother them in a classroom setting. Missions in the game, they teach students to think critically about the people they interact with online. If they fail a mission the first time, they can try again and again until they succeed, so they can learn from their mistakes in a safe environment and feel the satisfaction of success after failing. One of the limitations of these online safety games is that children don't always find them independently. And that's why we want to bring Cyber Defenders into schools and teach digital safety with it. We'll also help teachers use the game in the classroom by giving them the tools that they need. To do this, we've already made a first set of classroom materials that you can find on our website. We've created materials in 3 areas: understanding the game, using it in class, and extending the conversation to parents at home. For this work, schools are a crucial setting because they provide age-appropriate, supervised learning where kids can reflect and ask questions in a safe space. And we would really, really welcome the opportunity to work more closely with schools that are interested in bringing Cyber Defenders into the classroom. Our goal is not only to provide a game, but to support educators with practical tools that fit into existing teaching structures. If your school is interested in integrating Cyber Defenders into digital safety lessons or organizing a dedicated session, we would welcome the opportunity to collaborate and learn from your experience. And this could mean setting up a one-on-one meeting to go over the game together, talk about how it could fit into your current lessons, or just answer any questions you have about how to use it with your students. So, if you're curious or if you're thinking, hey, this could work in our school, please do reach out to us. We really see this as a collaborative effort. Your feedback, your experience, your ideas, they genuinely matter to us, and as we continue refining and improving these materials. I hope this presentation has helped you get a better sense of how online gaming environments have changed over time, the risks kids may face there, and how education can help stop these problems. Platforms will continue to change. Games will continue to evolve. But digital literacy and critical thinking, those are still our best bets. In a moment, my colleague Gabby will join me for a quick chat around gaming platforms and social media, and we will begin the live Q&A session. Please remember that Gabby and I are communication and gaming experts and not police officers. If you're interested in learning more about our operations, you will find more information on our website. But if you'd like to know more about cyber defenders and how we can help you incorporate it into your lessons, now's the time to ask all your questions. Go ahead, scan the QR code on the screen and add your questions through Slido if you haven't already. You can still send in your final questions before we move into the discussion, and we look forward to answering them shortly.
Children are growing up in a digital world. They connect, they learn, and they play online. Often without realizing the risks. But we can help. Cyber Defenders, developed by EUROPOL, uses gameplay to help children recognize the warning signs of online threats. Players take on the role of a EUROPOL officer, completing missions to identify suspicious links, fake profiles, and phishing attempts. To support educators, EUROPOL has created a Cyber Defenders resource kit, a collection of free materials designed to introduce cyber safety concepts in the classroom. By learning to recognize risks early, children can make safer choices and continue learning, playing, and growing online.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I'm joined now with my colleague Gabby, who's the social media expert here at EUROPOL. We're going to dive into the Q&A session, which is the last portion of this webinar. But before we do that, we're just going to have a quick chat around the topics we just discussed and about online gaming platforms and social media and how these are similar and how the risks can present themselves in both of these kinds of platforms. So before I start asking you some questions, let's look into the polls we had on Slido during the presentation. So we asked you guys which countries you were joining from. We have a bit of everything: Netherlands, Bulgaria, United States, Italy, Iceland, Romania, Hungary. The list goes on. So thank you, everyone from around the world, for joining. This is really great. We also asked you what video games you've played in the past. Here we also have a lot of everything. I see that we have a lot of 80s and 90s kids gamers with things like Super Mario and Rayman and a bunch of others. And we also have some modern things as well, like Minecraft and Roblox, which we discussed before, even Angry Birds, GTA. So really good stuff. Thank you for taking part in the polls. One of the most interesting ones was, what games do your students mention often? Most of you replied Roblox and Fortnite. Very relevant to this conversation. And might I say, one of the reasons we decided to have cyber defenders in Roblox is precisely so that we can be where children are playing most, where they need to be protected most. Most of you also said no to, do you think parents are generally aware of how much time kids spend on online games and social media? This is very important. And exactly what we wanted to address with this webinar: the need for communication, the need for parents and teachers to know what kids are playing, how much time they're playing, and how they're acting in these social spaces. Let's go ahead with the first question. Gabby, can you tell us more about what the differences between online gaming and social media are?
Hi, Carlotta. Hi, everyone online. Thank you for having me today. Yeah, so social media and online gaming, they are similar in some ways, but they also create really different experiences for children and for teens. So online gaming platforms, they build around play. So basically a user will come online and then they will play a game. They might be alone, they might be with others. And if they are with others, there's usually interactions. So that can be a voice, a chat, maybe some predefined messages, but they might be able to get into contact with other people. However, these conversations, they're usually based around the gameplay itself. For social media, it's about social interactions. So it's more about posting content, and then other people might be liking, commenting, maybe sharing. And you also have a chat function usually also available within social media. And one thing that's quite interesting, especially in the past few years, you saw that online gaming platforms they actually started resemble social media a bit more, where interactions like commenting, liking, or even discussion was happening a little bit more. And in both cases, you are able to basically talk to people. So from a law enforcement perspective, that does mean that there can be grooming risks happening in both platforms like online gaming and social media. And one big difference between online gaming platforms and social media is also age, where you're going to see that you're going to maybe have younger children on online gaming platforms. They tend to attract younger kids. And for social media, you might see teens, late teens, also adults.
Right. And that kind of brings me back to the debate that we were discussing before, where at what age should it be appropriate for children to be using both social media and online gaming platforms? I think it's really interesting what you mentioned about the games having social media-like mechanics, because it's not just things like friend requests and the ability to create groups with different users, or even chat functions, which is something very simple. But some of the games we're seeing recently are being designed in a way that includes social features. Like, for example, when a game like GTA has a camera option that allows you to record or do a snapshot of your gameplay and kind of synchronize it with your social media channels so that you can automatically post it with an already designated hashtag and things like that. Other games like League of Legends or Overwatch, they have things like upvotes where you can commend a player for having great teamwork or being really great in a specific match. So we're definitely seeing a change in which the design, like games are being designed from the very start to resemble in some aspects what social media platforms are like. But it's not just in these mechanics that it overlaps, right? Like, are there similar risks in these social media platforms as there are in the gaming platforms?
For sure. Some of the risks are similar, some also overlap, especially when children start to interact with others on gaming platforms. Personal data is something that you mentioned in your presentation. It can be targeted. Basically, any information that you will share online, even when it feels insignificant, it can be targeted. And the risk is multiplied when you start mixing social media and gaming platforms. So if you take grooming, for example, an offender might be able to find information on a child's social media profile or even on a parent's social media profile and then use that within the in-game messaging to be able to build rapport with the kids. So that can be things like where the kid goes to school, maybe what sports they play outside of school. And all of these are information that can be used to basically pretend that you have something in common with a child. Then something that you can also see happening is that you will see the conversation being taken away outside of the platform. So an offender might request to go to a messaging app like WhatsApp or Discord or Telegram, for example. And that is a major red flag. And that red flag is not always visible by the parents because they might be only monitoring what is happening on the gaming platform. And it's this combination of platforms, so the combination of social media, of online gaming platform, that can really play into what we call social engineering.
Right. And it's important to kind of note, or in what you were saying, I was reminded of the fact that parents, people who are parents today, most of them grew up in a world where we didn't have social media. So a lot of us remember that kind of transition from a non-online platform world to an online platform world, whereas kids nowadays have grown up in a completely digital world where social media is there from the moment they're born. Sometimes they even already have an online presence as children before they start playing, before they start having their own profiles on social media. And it's that difference of that when people who grew up without social media, they remember that there was a very clear separation between social media platforms and the real world. And now for kids, social media and gaming platforms, it's very much a kind of extension of the real world. It's just another space where they interact with their friends, where they interact with other people they know. And back then, I remember that, yes, there were cases where you met people online, either through social media or through online gaming spaces as well. But it didn't usually make the news, and now it seems like it's become a bit of the norm. We see bad things happening from this so often that it's become a true concern. But I think it's very similar. It's very important to kind of keep in mind that differentiation, that kids now grow up in a world where this online platforms world kind of reflects the real world, right? And that also means that you can't, unlike the real world, you can't make sure that you know who's behind the other side of the screen. And because of this, criminals are using all kinds of social engineering mechanisms that we typically see in lots of other different scams. Gabby, can you briefly explain what social engineering is for the audience?
Yeah, for those who don't know, social engineering is a form of manipulation. So it's when someone will trick a person into doing something like giving away account information or money. And they do that by abusing trust rather than by hacking the technology directly. So it's what you mentioned earlier in your presentation. You talked about fraud techniques within a game where a player could be tricked into giving away their personal information, like login details. So social engineering is very similar. It can take many forms of like phishing messages and giveaways, for example. So usually it's going to be fake giveaways, or it's going to be messages maybe telling you that you have a problem with your account and you need to log in or you need to give your account information. And all of these, it usually creates a sense of urgency. So the person will want to react very quickly rather than to think critically. And what is very interesting is that children, they're not the only victims of social engineering. I actually think that that's maybe something that our audience can relate to a little bit more. If some of them are employees in a company, I'm sure they've had some kind of a training on how to not fall for phishing messages, like don't click on the link if you don't know the senders. Or you had this very famous campaign a few years ago where you had a fake email coming from a CEO telling an employee like, hey, it's your CEO, I'm looking for this information, can you please give me your information right now? So it's very important for people to know the risk and to know how to protect themselves for this kind of social engineering. On the EUROPOL website, we actually have a very lengthy prevention guide which explains what are the risks, what are the warning signs, and also how can you protect yourself from social engineering.
That's right. And talk about prevention. What are some of the things parents or teachers can do to ensure that their children stay safe on social media?
So I first have to echo what you said earlier, and it's that being aware of the risks, but also taking preventive actions, that is absolutely paramount. There are moderation tools that are available within online platforms like social media, that help filter harmful content. But there's also millions and millions of interactions on social media every day. So it's very important that users are able to recognize the warning sign, recognize content, and report it if they see something that's not correct. Some of the lessons that you can learn in Cyber Defenders, they're actually applicable also on social media platforms. So you have the lessons that you mentioned where a kid can learn how to recognize when somebody is asking personal questions. That is also something that you can apply on social media platforms. It basically teaches them how to spot the warning sign early. So the game really provides essential skills to get the digital literacy that kids might need to navigate online spaces. And as you mentioned in your presentation, parents, but also teachers, they play a really important role. So teachers, they're able to bring some conversation into their classroom. So that's going to be conversation like what is personal information, or how to stay safe on online gaming. But you can also go into discussions like cyberbullying or social engineering. And the aim is really to give the children the confidence and the skill they need to navigate the platforms directly. And what is really great with this webinar that we're talking to teachers and educators is that they also have a direct line of communications to parents. And then parents can then in turn have conversation with their children about the safe use of social media and also online gaming. There are some tools on social media that parents can use as a parent to basically set some respectful boundaries with their children. So they can log into what is called a family center and create an account as a parent. And then it might help them set some boundaries like time limit, which can help with not being able to with not going online too long. So that might help with, for example, not spending too much time on social media, but they can also be able to check who is following their child. And then it's very important for the parents to have conversation with their children. So understand what the child is doing online. Why do they want to play the game? What kind of game are they playing? How the platform looks? What are the tools that you can use? And I think finally, I have to echo what you said in your presentation. It's you have to learn how to use the tool's own platform for reporting. And if something is really wrong, if you see that the situation has escalated and those tools are not enough, then it's time to go to national hotlines where you can get some help or even turn to your local police.
Thanks, Gabby. That was a great chat. And I think we have some questions coming in
We
from
have
the
so many
audience.
questions.
Yeah.
I see a
So
lot of questions on cyber defenders.
let's dive right in and start the Q&A session.
All right. I see a question from Fiona, and Fiona is asking, why did you launch the game on Roblox?
Okay. So as I was mentioning before, when it comes to prevention and when it comes to teaching kids what they need to know to stay safe, it's not about any one singular platform. It could have been Roblox, it could have been Minecraft. The point is that we need to be where kids are, where there's most kids playing. And right now, that's Roblox. And it's important. There are others very similar alternatives as well, but it's very important that we create games in the environments that children are familiar with, so that they can apply what they learn in these learning experiences and basically be able to recognize a real threat that is as close as possible as what they're seeing in the learning experience. That's basically why we wanted to do it on Roblox. We wanted to do it in that familiar environment that kids understand and where kids can potentially run into these kinds of threats.
And talking about familiar environment, I see a question from Julienne who is asking, how would you suggest we use cyber defenders in real classroom settings?
Yes. Okay. So in a real classroom setting, the way we pretty much envision cyber defenders being used is, of course, preferably in an IT classroom, because you would need kids to sit at either computers or tablets or phones, So an IT classroom would be the best setting. And the way this would work would be kids to be set up in pairs so that they can work through the missions together. So Cyber Defenders has 3 missions in total. Each mission is linked to a specific lesson to learn in cyber safety. So the best setup would be to have a pair of kids work on the missions together so that if one gets stuck, the other can help out, so that it's also a kind of collaborative working together exercise. And then in between missions, there's some kind of short classroom discussion about the safety lesson, about what they've learned, what they experienced in the game, possibly if they've ever run into a similar situation in real life when they were playing these games. And for that, we have several resources that are already on the website. We have a game guide for teachers, which is basically to drive those lessons. So basically, if kids get stuck on a specific mission, on a specific puzzle that they can't seem to solve, this game guide does provide a step-by-step run through of the entire game so that teachers can help students basically tell them what's the next step and how to get through it. And we also have an assessment booklet that we made, which can be used either at the end of the lesson in a classroom. It's basically a set of questions where kids get to reflect on the game, on the safety lessons that they just went through, on the missions, on the difficulty of the game. It's a bit of everything. And they can either do this in class right after playing the game, or they can bring it home as homework, as a homework assignment, and do it with their parents and use this opportunity to kind of start a discussion with their parents around Roblox or any other gaming platform they might be playing, who they talk to during these games, how and what they experience, basically.
I think I see a question that really relates to that. It's an anonymous question, and the question is Cyber Defenders something to play with the whole class, or give it to kids to play on their own at home, or and then share the experience?
I'd say a bit of both, actually. So I mentioned during the presentation that the Cyber Defenders game is a single player game. So Roblox, of course, is an online platform, but you do have the opportunity to play single player games. And Cyber Defenders is one example of that. It's built on a server where only one player can join at a time. So every other character that you encounter during the game is built into the game. It's a non-playable character that's set up to actually aid the mission and give you the safety lessons after each mission. It's not an actual real player behind. And because of this, I mentioned that this can be played in a classroom in pairs, ideally, because if a kid gets stuck, it's always nice to have that collaborative aspect in gameplay to work through it together. But of course, this can also be played outside the classroom at home. If there are kids who are already on Roblox, they can, of course, log into this game on their own or with their parents at home or with their older or younger brothers and sisters and do the experience by themselves, of course.
So I think you already answered the question from Lars in these answers, but I just want to make sure that you did. So Lars is asking, you said that Cyber Defenders is on a secure server and that only one player is in the game. That means that all other characters running around are not real players?
Exactly. So it's a completely single player game. Every other character that appears in the experience is a pre-scripted character that was built into the game. And I know there's a lot of questions on Cyber Defenders, but I actually see some as well on social media that I think would be interesting to answer. Here's one from Simon. Does the game also teach children to navigate social media safely?
Definitely, Simon. It's what I said earlier. The lessons that you find within the game, they're applicable across different platforms. There's also no too young of an age to start learning how to behave safely online, on social media, on gaming platforms. And there are things in the game that you will learn that are applicable also across different platforms. So for example, keeping your private information private. That is something that is very important on online gaming platforms, but that will also be applicable on social media, especially because social media is a place where your private becomes public. So the divide between public and private can become a little bit blurred. And it's important to understand, especially for a kid who might not really understand where that line is, how to keep your information private. There is also things like it teaches you to play with users you know in real life. That's something that you can also apply to social media. It's very nice to have a lot of followers on social media, but it might also be important to know who follows you. Why do they follow you? Or maybe why do you follow certain people? There's a lot of red flags to watch out for that are built into the game. And these are lessons that are good to take all across the board. And finally, one of the greatest lessons, at least in my opinion, on the game is knowing when to ask for help. And I think that's something that children sometimes don't always have the options of learning. And on social media, you might not think, if you're a child, that if you encounter something wrong, that you might be able to ask for help. But maybe if you played Cyber Defenders and you understand that lesson, you might be able to take it also on social media. We do have a bit more time, I think. So I see even more questions about Cyber Defenders in Roblox. Are you okay to take one or two more, Carlota?
Yeah, we have time.
All right, so we're talking about social media, about interactions, and we talked about messaging. And I see a question, it's an anonymous question that asks, are there messaging options for kids to use within the game, or is that taken out to help them learn not to use it?
Yes, absolutely. So this goes back to what I was talking about before. Roblox is a platform that typically does have a chat and the option to add your friends on it and everything. And this is outside the game. Within the actual game of Cyber Defenders, there is no chats, there is no friend requests. Like, you don't interact with any other players. Students can, of course, log into the game at the same time, but they're not going to encounter each other in the game. The game is a completely single player experience. And the reason we did this is because we do think it's important for the learning experience to happen properly, to have a control over the narrative that happens in these online games, and to not let anything to chance. And in order for that to happen, it needs to be fully offline. But yes, the mechanics that we show within the missions simulate what online interactions are for. So, for example, what the example I was talking about before, during the gameplay footage, where there's one mission where the user has to kind of identify potentially harmful questions or potentially personal questions being asked in the game. You see a bunch of characters running around with speech bubbles, and the moment you see a personal question, that's when you kind of have to act in the game so that to identify the criminal. Obviously, this doesn't happen in the real online setting, but it does put the kid in the mindset of understanding or being alert and understanding when that's happening, to kind of move away from that situation, or when someone's asking them two personal questions, to understand that that shouldn't be happening and that that's the moment they have to ask for help.
And talking about asking for help, I see a question from Linda. And the question goes, how can school involve parents in this conversation without creating unnecessary alarm?
Right. So I like to use the example that the same way that we in schools, we teach kids what to do in case of a fire or in case of an accident in some schools. I remember when I was a kid, they taught us how to do CPR. It doesn't mean that these things are going to happen. It simply means that we are preparing kids to know how to act in case something happens. And this is exactly the same thing, right? If, like, teaching kids how to detect these issues when they're playing online, which is the same issues they'd encounter playing anywhere else. It prevents them, it puts them in a place where they can have the confidence and the understanding of what's going on and know how to act when it happens. So it's the basis of prevention, basically. Teach them what they need to do should the situation arise. It doesn't mean that the situation is already occurring, but it does mean that we should prepare kids as best as possible in the case that they're ever put in that situation.
I think that's a very important lesson to take home.
Yeah.
We have time for one last question.
Okay, let's go.
I see a question from Joy asking if the slides will be made available to participants and if this webinar is available after it has finished so we can watch it again.
Yes, of course. The webinar will be uploaded to YouTube. It will be available after this live session. And we will also be sending an email to all the participants that registered with a link to the recorded webinar, as well as a contact email for any schools that want to get in touch with us to talk more about the game. Like I said before, we want as much feedback as possible on the game, on the resources that we have on the website. Getting feedback from real educators and real teachers is really important to us because it will make us be able to do better resources and to give you exactly the tools you need to be able to implement the game into the classroom and to conduct good cyber safety lessons. So please do reach out. And with that, I think we can conclude this webinar. I'd like to thank everyone for joining, for sending all your questions, for participating in the polls. This has been great. And again, please, if you have any follow-up questions that we haven't answered, please feel free to send us a message.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.